The church was silent except for my mother-in-law's voice cutting through the air like a blade. She was too weak to survive, just like her mother. Those words hit me harder than any physical blow ever could. I stood frozen at my 9-year-old daughter Melody's funeral, watching as relatives around me actually nodded in agreement. My hands shook as I gripped the pew in front of me, trying to process that Patricia had just called both me and my dead child weak, here, in front of everyone who was supposed to be mourning with us. That's when I heard the scrape of wood against floor. My 7-year-old son Ethan stood up from his seat beside me, his small voice cutting through the horrible silence with unexpected steadiness. "Grandma Patricia, should I show everyone what you put in Melody's cup?" The entire congregation turned. Patricia's face drained of color so fast I thought she might faint. Her perfectly manicured hand flew to her chest, gripping the pearl necklace she always wore to church. "Ethan, sweetheart, what are you talking about? Sit down. You're confused and upset about your sister." But Ethan didn't sit down. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small plastic bag, holding it high above his head so everyone could see. The pastor's Bible hit the floor with a thunderous crash that echoed off the church walls. Reverend Mills, who had baptized both my children and known our family for 15 years, stood with his mouth open in shock. "These are the pills you crushed up and put in her special tea," Ethan announced, his voice growing stronger with each word. "Every single day I watched you do it. I took pictures." David, my husband, jumped to his feet beside me, his face a mask of confusion and growing horror. "Ethan, what are you saying? Mom, what is he talking about?" Patricia's carefully constructed composure cracked like ice under pressure. "That child is lying. He's traumatized. Rachel has poisoned him against me, turned him into a liar just like her." "I'm not lying," Ethan said simply. "You killed my sister because you hate my mommy, and now everyone is going to know what you did." The church erupted. Some people gasped. Others started whispering frantically. Uncle Raymond tried to move toward Ethan, but Pastor Theodore stepped between them, his face grave. Patricia's sister Gloria clutched her purse to her chest as if it could protect her from what was unfolding. I looked at my brave little boy standing there in his too big funeral suit, the one we'd bought just 3 days ago because nothing in his closet was appropriate for saying goodbye to his sister. He was holding evidence of murder at his own sister's funeral, and he wasn't backing down. What happened next changed everything I thought I knew about my daughter's death, about my family, and about the evil that can hide behind a grandmother's smile. 3 days before the funeral, I was just Rachel Winters, a normal elementary school teacher sitting at my kitchen table, grading papers while trying to keep one eye on my children. The afternoon sun streamed through our windows, casting golden light across the stack of 4th-grade math tests I needed to finish before Monday. My daughter, Melody, sat across from me, her tongue poking out slightly as she concentrated on painting another butterfly. She'd filled an entire sketchbook with them over the past 2 weeks, each one more colorful than the last. "Mom, look at this one. I used your favorite colors," Melody said, holding up her latest creation. The butterfly's wings were a swirl of purple and gold with tiny silver dots that caught the light. She'd been getting better after weeks of what doctors had called a severe flu, and seeing her enthusiasm return made my chest feel lighter than it had in months. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." "We should frame this one," I told her, reaching over to smooth her dark hair. It was finally growing back to its normal thickness after the illness had made it brittle and thin. Her laugh filled the kitchen, that particular giggle that sounded like wind chimes. "Mom, you say that about all of them." "Because they're all frame-worthy," I insisted, making her laugh again. Ethan was sprawled on the living room floor, building something elaborate with his blocks, while occasionally making explosion sounds. At 7, he was quieter than most boys his age, preferring to observe rather than be the center of attention. He'd been extra watchful since Melody got sick, following her around like a protective shadow whenever she was up and moving. My husband David was still at the bank, probably in another endless meeting about quarterly reports. He'd been working longer hours lately, trying to secure a promotion that would help with the medical bills that had been piling up despite our insurance. We didn't talk about the financial stress in front of the kids, but I knew it was wearing on him. I could see it in the way his shoulders stayed tense, even when he smiled. The front door opened, and Patricia walked in without knocking, as she always did. My mother-in-law believed that boundaries were for other people, not for her when it came to her son's house. She carried a pot of something that smelled like her famous chicken soup and a thermos of what she called her special herbal tea. "How's my granddaughter feeling today?" she asked, though she looked at me when she said it, as if I was somehow responsible for Melody's illness. "Much better, Patricia. The doctor says she's definitely on the mend," I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral. Patricia and I had been dancing this complicated dance for 12 years, ever since David chose to marry me instead of Christina, the daughter of Patricia's best friend from church. Patricia had made it clear from day one that I wasn't what she'd envisioned for her only son. Well, you know what I always say. Modern medicine only does so much. Traditional remedies, that's what really works. She moved into the kitchen like she owned it, setting down her pot and immediately starting to heat water for tea. "Melody, dear, time for your special grandma tea." Melody made a face but didn't protest. The tea had become part of our routine over the past 3 weeks, ever since Patricia had insisted on helping with Melody's recovery. "Grandma says her tea will make me strong," Melody had told me the first week, though she'd also whispered that it tasted funny, like metal and flowers mixed together. "It's an old family recipe," Patricia had explained when I asked about the ingredients. "Herbs from my mother's garden, dried and prepared just right. It's been keeping the Winters family healthy for generations." I'd been too exhausted to argue. Between teaching full-time, caring for a sick child, and trying to keep our household running, I'd welcome the help even if it came from Patricia. My own mother, Joyce, lived 2 states away in Oregon and could only offer support through daily phone calls. "Rachel, you really should consider cutting Melody's hair shorter," Patricia said as she stirred the tea. "Long hair takes energy from the body that should be going toward healing." "Her hair is fine, Patricia," I said, not looking up from my grading. "I'm just trying to help. Though I suppose you know best, being a teacher and all," she replied, her tone suggesting she believed exactly the opposite. David arrived home just as Patricia was leaving, kissing his mother's cheek and thanking her for the soup. After she left, he slumped into a chair beside me, loosening his tie with one hand while reaching for Melody's artwork with the other. "Another butterfly? This one might be my favorite," he said, winking at Melody. "Dad, you say that about all of them too," she protested, but she was beaming. Looking back now, I realized that was the last truly normal evening we had as a complete family. Melody painted 3 more butterflies before bedtime. Ethan helped her choose colors. David and I sat on the couch, his arm around my shoulders, watching our children just be children. If I'd known what was coming, I would have memorized every second, recorded every laugh, saved every butterfly. Everything shattered the next morning at exactly 9:47 a.m. I remember the time because I was glancing at the kitchen clock, thinking we needed to leave for Melody's doctor appointment in an hour. Patricia had arrived early, insisting she wanted to give Melody her morning tea before we left. She'd been doing this for 3 weeks, showing up with her thermos and her determined smile, brushing aside my suggestions that maybe Melody didn't need the tea anymore since she was improving. "Consistency is key with natural remedies," Patricia had said, already pulling out Melody's favorite cup, the one with painted daisies on it. "You can't just stop when you feel better. That's how relapse happens." Melody was sitting at the table, still in her pajamas, working on another butterfly. This one had orange and pink wings. She looked up when Patricia set the steaming cup in front of her, and I caught the briefest flash of reluctance in her eyes. "Drink it all, dear. Every drop counts," Patricia said, standing over her like a sentinel. Melody picked up the cup with both hands, took a deep breath, and started drinking. She'd gotten about halfway through when her face went completely white. The cup slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor, hot tea splashing across the tiles. "Mommy, I feel dizzy," she whispered, reaching for me. Before I could get to her, she crumpled forward, her head hitting the table with a sickening thud. I screamed, rushing to catch her as she slid toward the floor. Her body was limp, her breathing shallow and rapid. "Call 911, I shouted at Patricia, who stood frozen, her hand pressed to her mouth. Ethan appeared in the doorway, his eyes wide with terror. "What's wrong with Melody?" "She's just having a reaction," Patricia said, finally moving to get her phone. But her voice was strange, almost calm. She's always been fragile. Some children just aren't meant to survive these things. Stop talking and call for help. I was cradling Melody's head in my lap, feeling her pulse race under my fingers. Her skin was clammy and cold. The ambulance arrived in 8 minutes that felt like 8 hours. The paramedics worked with practiced efficiency, checking vitals, starting an IV, loading her onto a gurney. I climbed in beside her while Patricia said she'd drive Ethan and meet us at the hospital. What did she consume? The paramedic asked me as we raced through traffic. Just some herbal tea. My mother-in-law makes it. She's been drinking it for weeks with no problems. The paramedic frowned but said nothing more, focusing on monitoring Melody's increasingly erratic heartbeat. David arrived at the hospital within minutes of us, his face white with panic. What happened? She was fine last night. She was painting. I don't know. She just collapsed after drinking Patricia's tea. Patricia appeared with Ethan, her church friends Gloria and Raymond trailing behind her. These things happen with sick children, she was telling them. I've been saying she wasn't strong enough. That girl inherited too much from her mother's side. Patricia, stop, David said sharply. This isn't the time. I'm just being realistic, she replied. Someone needs to be. 3 hours passed in a blur of tests, machines, and medical terminology I couldn't fully grasp. Doctors came and went, their faces increasingly grave. Finally, Dr. Harrison, who'd been treating Melody since she first got sick, pulled us into a small room. I'm sorry, he said, and my world ended with those 2 words. We did everything we could. Her system just shut down, complete organ failure. Sometimes, with severe flu, complications can arise suddenly, even during recovery. David collapsed into a chair. I stood frozen, unable to process what I was hearing. But she was getting better. She was painting butterflies this morning. These things can happen very quickly, Dr. Harrison said gently. There was nothing anyone could have done. Through my shock, I heard Patricia in the hallway telling Gloria, I knew this would happen. That child was never strong. Rachel's genetics, weak stock. But Ethan had been watching everything with those careful eyes of his. That night, after we'd somehow made it home without Melody, after I'd sat staring at her empty chair until David guided me to bed, Ethan crept into our room. Mommy, he whispered, climbing up beside me, Grandma's tea isn't just tea. I saw her put something else in it from a different bottle. She keeps it in her purse. I was too destroyed to really hear him. My baby was gone. The house felt wrong without her laugh, without her butterflies scattered across every surface. She crushes little white pills, Ethan continued, determined to be heard. Every time. She thinks I'm playing with my blocks, but I watch. She said they were vitamins, but vitamins don't come in medicine bottles with Grandma's name on them. David heard this and sat up. What are you saying, buddy? I'm saying Grandma put something bad in Melody's tea, and I took pictures with your old phone you gave me to play games on. The room suddenly felt very cold. David and I looked at each other across our son's head, and I saw my own terrible suspicion reflected in his eyes. The night before the funeral, our house felt like a crime scene, even though Melody had died at the hospital. Every surface held evidence of her interrupted life. Her breakfast bowl still sat in the dishwasher. Her toothbrush stood in the holder next to Ethan's. And spread across the kitchen table were 17 butterfly paintings she'd never get to finish. Ethan came to my room at exactly 10 p.m., holding something carefully in his small hands like he was carrying a baby bird. David was downstairs, supposedly making funeral arrangements, but really just staring at his laptop screen, unable to focus on anything. Mommy, I need to show you something, Ethan said, his voice steady in a way that broke my heart. 7-year-olds shouldn't have to be this brave. He opened his palm to reveal a small plastic sandwich bag with several crushed white pills inside. I took this from Grandma's purse yesterday when she wasn't looking. This is what she put in Melody's tea every single day. I watched her do it. My hands trembled as I took the bag. The pills were partially crushed, but I could still make out partial markings on some of the larger pieces. Ethan, are you absolutely sure? I'm sure. He pulled out David's old phone, the one we'd given him to play educational games on. Look. The pictures were blurry, but clear enough. Patricia standing at our kitchen counter, her back partially turned, crushing something with the back of a spoon. Another photo showed her tipping powder from her palm into Melody's daisy cup. A third caught her stirring the tea with one hand while holding what was clearly a prescription bottle in the other. She always said it was special vitamins to make Melody strong, Ethan explained. But one time the bottle fell out of her purse and I saw the label. It had her name on it. Medicine bottles have names when they're from the pharmacy, right? That's what Mrs. Johnson taught us at school. I called for David, my voice cracking. He came running up the stairs, probably thinking I was having another breakdown. When I showed him the bag and the pictures, his face went through a series of transformations I'd never seen before. Confusion, disbelief, horror, and finally, a terrible understanding. "Oh my God," he breathed, sinking onto the bed. He took the bag with shaking fingers, examining it under the lamp. "These look like Mom's digoxin, her heart medication." "Heart medication?" I could barely get the words out. "She's been on it for years. Too much would cause exactly what happened to Melody. Dizziness, collapse, organ failure." His voice broke completely. "My mother poisoned our daughter." We sat in horrible silence for a moment before Ethan spoke again. "We have to tell everyone." "We'll go to the police right now," I said, already standing up. "No." Ethan's voice was firm. "Tomorrow, at the funeral." David and I both stared at him. "Buddy, what are you talking about?" David asked. "Grandma invited all those people who think Mommy isn't good enough. Uncle Raymond, Aunt Gloria, all her church friends who whisper about us. They're all gonna be there." Ethan's logic was devastating in its clarity. "If we go to the police now, Grandma will make up a story. She'll say Mommy planted it or that I'm lying, but if I tell everyone at the funeral, with all those people watching, she won't be able to lie her way out." "Ethan, that's too much pressure on you," I said, pulling him close. "You don't have to do this." "Yes, I do." He looked up at me with eyes far too wise for his age. "Melody was my sister. She taught me to read when I was 4. She gave me her allowance when I broke my piggy bank. She never told on me when I snuck cookies before dinner. And Grandma killed her because she hates you, Mommy. Because Melody was yours." David made a sound like he'd been punched. "Mom always wanted me to marry Christina. She never accepted Rachel. But I never thought she'd actually hurt our children." "She didn't hurt me because I look like you, Daddy," Ethan said simply. "But Melody looked just like Mommy. Grandma said so all the time." We stayed up the rest of the night, caught between calling the police immediately and letting Ethan execute his plan. David paced the floor, occasionally stopping to punch the wall, leaving knuckle marks in the drywall. I held Ethan while he practiced what he would say, his words becoming more confident with each rehearsal. "You don't have to be perfect," I told him. "Just tell the truth." "The truth is enough," he said, sounding like an old soul in a child's body. "Grandma taught me that lying is a sin. Tomorrow, everyone will know who the real sinner is." David finally stopped pacing around 3 a.m. "If we do this, if we let Ethan confront her at the funeral, there's no going back. My entire family will implode." "Your family killed our daughter," I reminded him, the words tasting like poison. "I know." He sat down heavily, his head in his hands. "I know. And they all enabled her. All those times they agreed with her about Rachel not being good enough, about our children being weak, they gave her permission in her mind." Ethan fell asleep in my arms around 4 a.m., still clutching the phone with the pictures. David and I sat vigil over him, over the evidence, over the memory of our daughter who died because she had the audacity to look like me. When the sun came up, we dressed in black and prepared to bury one child while the other sought justice. The church was packed with Patricia's carefully curated guest list. She'd taken control of the funeral arrangements while I was catatonic with grief, inviting her entire social circle from the ladies' auxiliary, the church board she'd served on for 20 years, and every relative who'd ever made me feel small at family gatherings. They sat in their pressed black clothes like a jury that had already reached its verdict about me. Patricia stood at the podium in a designer black dress that probably cost more than our monthly mortgage, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, even though I hadn't seen her shed a single genuine tear. Behind her, Melody's white casket was surrounded by flowers Patricia had selected without asking me, all white roses. Melody had loved colorful wildflowers, but Patricia said those weren't appropriate for a proper funeral. My granddaughter was special, Patricia began, her voice carrying that perfect blend of sorrow and strength that she'd perfected over years of church performances. But from the day she was born, I could see she was fragile. Some children are born with strong constitutions, blessed with the resilience that runs in good families for generations. But Melody, sweet as she was, inherited a different kind of constitution. She paused, letting her eyes sweep over the congregation before landing on me. She was too weak to survive, just like her mother. The words hit me like physical blows. I heard Gloria murmur agreement from 2 rows back. Uncle Raymond nodded solemnly, his hand on his wife's knee. Other relatives, people who'd watched my children grow up, were actually nodding along as if Patricia was delivering some profound truth instead of spitting on my daughter's memory. Some bloodlines, Patricia continued, simply aren't strong enough for this world. It's not anyone's fault, it's just biology. Nature has its way of correcting imbalances. That's when Ethan stood up. The movement was so sudden and decisive that everyone turned. My 7-year-old son, in his too big suit with his carefully combed hair, stood with his shoulders back and his chin raised. He looked exactly like David in that moment, but with my determination burning in his eyes. "Grandma Patricia," his voice rang out clear and strong, "should I show everyone what you put in Melody's cup?" The entire church went silent. Patricia's face drained of color so completely that the makeup she'd carefully applied stood out like a mask. Her hand clutched the podium for support. "Ethan, sweetheart, you're confused. You're grieving. Please sit down." "I'm not confused." Ethan pulled the plastic bag from his pocket, holding it high above his head. "These are your heart pills, your digoxin. You crush them up and put them in Melody's special tea every single day." Pastor Theodore's Bible crashed to the floor. The sound echoed through the sanctuary like thunder. Several people gasped. Gloria's hand flew to her mouth. "That's absurd." Patricia's voice cracked, losing its polished tone. "David, control your son. He's obviously traumatized." But Ethan kept going. "I have pictures on Dad's old phone. You crushing the pills, you putting them in her cup, you stirring them in while telling Melody it would make her strong." "You lying little brat!" Patricia shrieked, starting to move toward him. David stood up, blocking her path. "Mom, is it true?" "Of course it's not true. This child has been poisoned against me by that woman." She pointed at me with a shaking finger. "She's turned him into a liar just like her." "Then you won't mind if we test these pills," Ethan said calmly, "or check the pharmacy records to see how many refills you got. Daddy said you only need 1 pill a day, but you've been getting refills every 2 weeks. Uncle Raymond tried to move toward Ethan, his face red with anger. "How dare you disrespect your grandmother at your sister's funeral?" Pastor Theodore stepped between them, his voice commanding. "Nobody moves. This is a serious accusation." He looked at Patricia, his expression grave. "Patricia, if this child is lying, we can easily prove it. Let's see the pills." "This is ridiculous," Patricia screamed, but her mask was slipping. "I don't have to prove anything to anyone. I've been a member of this church since before most of you were born." "You killed my sister because you hate my mommy," Ethan said, his voice steady but tears now streaming down his face. "You said she wasn't good enough for Daddy. You said her blood was weak. You said it all the time when you thought I wasn't listening. But I heard everything. I saw everything." "She wasn't good enough." Patricia suddenly exploded, her careful facade completely shattered. "I told David not to marry her. I told him Christina would give him better children, strong children, not weak little things that get sick at the drop of a hat." The congregation gasped collectively. David made a sound like he'd been gutted. "So you poisoned her?" I stood up, my voice carrying strength I didn't know I had. "You poisoned a 9-year-old child because she had my blood? It was mercy," Patricia screamed. "She would have grown up weak and pathetic like you, always sick, always needing special attention. Better to end it now than watch her fail at everything like her mother." "Mom, oh God, Mom, what did you do?" David collapsed back into the pew, sobbing. Pastor Theodore already had his phone out. "I'm calling the police. Nobody leaves this church." Patricia tried to run then, but the doors were blocked by congregation members who'd finally understood the horror of what they were witnessing. She spun around looking for allies, but even Gloria had backed away from her. "You all know me," Patricia cried desperately. "You know I'm a good person. I was protecting the family bloodline, protecting my son from the mistake he made marrying that nobody. That nobody is my mommy," Ethan said quietly. "And Melody was my sister, and you're a murderer." The police arrived within minutes, their sirens cutting through the morning air. As they led Patricia away in handcuffs, she was still screaming about weak bloodlines and family honor, about how she'd done nothing wrong, about how we'd all regret turning against her. Ethan ran to me then, sobbing in my arms. "I did it, Mommy. I told them what she did." "You're the bravest person I know," I whispered, holding him tight while David knelt beside us, his body shaking with sobs, our family broken, but the truth finally horribly free. Patricia was charged with first-degree murder that same afternoon. The autopsy revealed levels of digoxin in Melody's system that could only have been deliberately administered over time. The medical examiner explained that Patricia had been slowly poisoning my daughter for weeks, carefully calculating each dose to mimic a natural decline from illness. She'd studied the symptoms online, deleted her search history, but forensics recovered everything. "How long does digoxin take to kill a child?" was searched 17 times from her phone. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Patricia's lawyer tried to claim dementia, temporary insanity, even suggested I'd planted the evidence. But Ethan's photos, the pharmacy records showing excessive refills, and Patricia's own confession at the funeral made the case ironclad. She got life without parole. When they read the verdict, she looked at David and said, "I did it for you." He walked out and never looked back. David and I tried to save our marriage for 8 months. We went to counseling, we held each other through nightmares, we tried to rebuild. But every time he looked at me, I saw him wondering if his mother was right, if marrying me had somehow led to our daughter's death. Every time I looked at him, I saw Patricia's features and wondered how he'd never noticed his mother's evil. We separated on what would have been Melody's 10th birthday. The divorce was finalized 2 months later. David moved to Colorado, started over with a new job, new life, new everything. He sends money for Ethan and sees him every summer and alternating holidays. He's in therapy, working through the guilt of choosing his mother's approval over his family's safety for so many years. He recently told Ethan he's dating someone named Anne, a widow who understands complicated grief. I hope she helps him heal. Uncle Raymond never apologized. He maintains to this day that Patricia was pushed to her breaking point by my presence in the family. He wrote a letter to the judge asking for leniency, calling Patricia a good Christian woman who lost her way. The judge read it aloud during sentencing, then gave her the maximum sentence anyway. Gloria sends Christmas cards with no message, just her signature, as if that somehow maintains propriety while acknowledging the horror. My mother Joyce sold her house in Oregon and moved 3 blocks away from us. She never once said, "I told you so," though we both know she'd sensed something dark in Patricia from the beginning. She helps with Ethan, makes sure I eat when grief makes me forget, and keeps Melody's butterfly paintings in perfect condition in special archival frames throughout her house. Ethan started therapy the week after the funeral. Dr. Martinez, a child psychologist who specializes in trauma, told me Ethan showed remarkable resilience, but needed to process being the one who exposed a family murder. For 6 months, Ethan barely spoke, except in therapy. Then one day, he came home from school and said, "Melody would want me to paint butterflies." We bought art supplies that afternoon. His butterflies are different from hers, more geometric, more precise, but equally beautiful. He's 11 now and wants to be a detective when he grows up. "So bad people can't hide behind smiles," he says. He's the top student in his class, observant to the point where his teachers call him unusually perceptive. He sees a therapist once a month now, down from weekly. Dr. Martinez says he's processing everything in a healthy way, but he'll always carry the weight of being the one who had to save his family from itself. We planted a butterfly garden at Melody's grave, using seeds from wildflowers, not the white roses Patricia would have chosen. Every spring, when the monarchs migrate through, Ethan and I sit there and tell her about our lives. He tells her about his grades, his friends. The boy who tried to bully him until Ethan calmly explained he'd testified in a murder trial and wasn't scared of middle school drama. I tell her about my new job at a different school, about the butterfly tattoo I got with her initials, about how I'm learning to trust again. Some nights I wake up in a cold sweat, wondering what signs I missed. How many cups of tea did I watch her drink? How many times did Patricia's kindness feel wrong, but I pushed aside my instincts because I was exhausted and needed help? The answer haunts me. At least 24 times I handed my daughter over to her killer and thanked her for the assistance. I've learned that monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they bring homemade soup and offer to help with the children. Sometimes they smile at church and serve on committees and have everyone convinced they're pillars of the community. Sometimes they're the ones who are supposed to love and protect your children. Patricia taught me that evil can wear a grandmother's face and speak in a grandmother's voice while calculating the exact amount of poison needed to stop a 9-year-old's heart. Trust, once shattered by family, never fully heals. I double-check everything now. When the school nurse gives Ethan Tylenol for a headache, I verify the dose. When my mother watches him, I check in every hour. I know it's not healthy, but neither is burying your daughter because you trusted the wrong person. My therapist says hypervigilance is a normal response to trauma. We're working on it. But here's what I want you to remember from our story. Sometimes the smallest voice in the room carries the biggest truth. My 7-year-old son did what dozens of adults couldn't or wouldn't do. He paid attention. He collected evidence. He stood up in front of everyone and spoke the truth, even when his hands were shaking. He saved other children Patricia might have hurt if she'd gotten away with it. The detective on the case told me they found searches on her computer about inheritance laws if both grandchildren die, dated the week before Melody's death. Ethan painted a butterfly last week with a police badge in the center of its wings. Above it, he wrote, "For Melody, who taught me to be brave, the truth has wings too." It hangs in our kitchen where her paintings used to be, a reminder that justice can come from unexpected places, that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's a quiet voice saying, "I saw what you did." If you're watching this and something in your life feels wrong, trust that instinct. Don't wait for tragedy to validate your concerns. That uncomfortable feeling you get around certain people exists for a reason. Our bodies know danger before our minds accept it. I ignored my instincts because I was tired, overwhelmed, and wanted to believe in family. That politeness, that benefit of the doubt, cost me my daughter. Melody would have been 13 this year. Ethan painted purple and gold butterflies on a birthday cake we ate anyway, celebrating the life she had and the truth that finally set her free. We sang happy birthday through tears, just the two of us, in a house that still echoes with phantom laughter and the ghost of little feet running down hallways that are now too quiet. Some stories don't have happy endings. They have necessary endings. Patricia will die in prison, but Melody is still gone. Ethan has justice, but not his sister. I have the truth, but not my daughter. We're learning to live with the weight of that reality, to find moments of joy despite the permanent shadow, to honor Melody by living fully even when it feels impossible. The butterflies return every spring. Monarchs, painted ladies, swallowtails. They fill our garden with colors Melody would have loved. Ethan and I watch them and remember a girl who painted wings before she grew her own. If this story moved you, please share it. Someone in your life might need to hear that it's okay to question family, to trust children when they speak up, to believe that evil can hide behind familiar faces. Leave a comment about a time you wished you'd trusted your instincts, and subscribe to this channel for more stories about finding truth in the darkest places. Thank you for listening to Melody's story. May her butterflies remind you to pay attention, to protect the innocent, and to speak up when something isn't right, no matter who you're speaking against.